Can we build a 5-way, star-shaped interchange? Let's put our highway building skills to the test as we attempt to bring 5 different highways together. The trick will be to connect each one to every other one. Stay with me to see if we can do it. My name is College Builder. By day, I work as a college dean, and by night, I play City Skylines 2. Give me your honest grade for the interchange in the comments, an A through F. Welcome to Marathon Cove, my Southern California-inspired series. This is episode 21. Marathon Cove is off to a great start, but with the release of the Bridges and Ports DLC, it's time to open up the other side of the map. We want to connect this massive peninsula with our road and rail. I've also had my eye on these 2 islands. We'll need names for them. Hopefully, we can connect these new areas with the original parts of Marathon Cove and our future downtown. Let's start by removing the existing rail that came with the map and then purchase new map tiles. This is probably more land than we need for the 5-way interchange, but better safe than sorry. We'll bring the elevated highway from Verano and Sunrise Channel down to ground level. Let's use the slope terrain tool to create a smooth incline. To keep things clear, let's call this Highway A. Next, we'll use the complex curve tool to create an S-shaped curve taking A into Highway D. We want to create a loop ramp onto A using the continuous curve tool with an elevation step of 1.25 meters to ensure the elevation change is very gradual. We're using the page up key to raise our ramp to 5 meters, then up to 8.75 meters, the minimum height needed for clearance. Using the upgrade tool and dragging along the one-way ramp, we can correctly reverse the direction. This shows us the beginning connection between highways A and B. By downgrading Highway A to 2 lanes, we create space for our merge ramps. Although we are playing with mods, I'm building this interchange without using Anarchy or Move It to see how far we can get. Let's create our second loop ramp, connecting the other side of A and B. As we work through this build, we will frequently need to place a ramp to see how everything fits, but then remove it and try again to improve the ramp curve. We may even need to do that several times, since this interchange is so complex and we are figuring it out as we go. Let's now create the ramps to connect highways A and C. The first ramp is easy, as it connects at ground level at the same place as the ramp from B. The second ramp is much harder, as it must go up and over Highway D, then under Highway E to connect A and C. This A to C flyover will take us a few tries to get right, as we want the curve to be smooth and the elevation change to be gradual from under E to back over D. Using Snap to Guidelines will help align the 2 parts of our ramp. Let's correct the exit lanes on A so we have room for the C exit, but also to start the exit to Highway E. You can now see the 5 different highways starting to emerge. Some of the lowest level ramps have been completed, so let's add in the flyover ramp from Highway C up to E. This one is tricky because it crosses the A to D section at the very bottom, but also the flyover ramp from A to C, which has a little bit of elevation. The pieces of A, B, and C are coming together to form Highway E. As we connect these pieces, we see terrain appear under the highway. To guarantee an elevated ramp, select the Force Elevated option. When using the upgrade tool on different sections, whether adding a lane or reversing the direction of a one-way ramp, we need to know which settings are enabled. In this building phase, we want elevated sections, but we will come back to change some of these to terrain level once we are done. It feels like Highway E is coming together nicely, but the ramp from C to E is still a bit janky, so let's raise the elevation to 12.5 meters for a smooth clearance. As more of E is built out, we can revisit that troublesome ramp from A to C. The curve's smoothness remains lacking, as it dips below E and then rises over D. Let's rebuild the A to C ramp completely. this time giving it a wider arc. This is what I mentioned earlier. Sometimes we need to see how it all fits by drawing things out imperfectly, and then delete a ramp or two so we can create smoother curves and gradients once we see where everything goes. This is still not perfect, but with C to E looking better, we should build the reverse, E to C, to help us understand the space we are working with. I hope we can keep all these ramps clear, but now that E to C is built, we can better visualize how to construct the ramp from A to C with the correct curve and gradient. This new A to C flyover looks so much better. We've completely ignored Highway D, so let's create our simple exit ramp from E to D, adding in a basic merge lane by creating a node and then widening the highway. Next, we'll begin the complicated process of creating a stacked ramp in the opposite direction, from D back to E. This ramp will need 17.5 meters of elevation for clearance over the Highway C ramps. Although this is one of the tallest of our elevated ramps, the curve is relatively easy to create. However, like many of our ramps, we need to align everything, go back and delete a segment, and then rebuild it in order to achieve a smooth curve. While we are building the D to E connections, let's also add a merge lane from D to C. Again, this ramp should be a relatively simple directional connection, without any stacking or crossovers. Well, maybe it's not as simple as it seems. The D to C ramp could have been at ground level, but we are making it branch off from the D to E flyover ramp, which must be elevated. The Highway D connections are starting to come together nicely, and we can see the star shape much more clearly. On second thought, let's change this D to E flyover ramp to 1 lane rather than 2. We can revisit the number of lanes in the future if traffic is too problematic. The reason for the change is that we need to add a flyover ramp from Highway D to Highway B. After the loop ramps, we have made no other connections to Highway B, but 2 of them are quite tricky. The first tricky one is D to B. This ramp branches off from D, then crosses over the elevated and ground level parts of C before merging into B. Part of the challenge is that we don't quite know what we are doing with Highway B. It will eventually develop into a local avenue leading to downtown, but we aren't exactly sure which way it should go. We haven't made our downtown grid, so let's make our best guess. These Highway B lanes will need to be redone a few times, but right now we are seeing how everything will fit together. The B to A lane is an easy directional ramp going down to ground level with no lane crossings. For Highway B, it would be great to switch to parallel mode. Let's make the ends of the lanes line up, and then we can use the parallel mode to extend the highway. As we've done before, we will delete some road segments and redraw them to get smoother curves. The second tricky connection, and I think the most difficult, is from Highway E into Highway B. We'll first try this highway piece at 18.75 meters, by far the tallest of our highways and ramps in the interchange. The lanes must slope smoothly down to the loop ramp. They must also cross the Highway E lanes, which go in the opposite direction. The first complicated part is lining up the E to B ramp. We must now create the rest of E, which splits into C and D. We divide the main highway sections of E into 2 branches, and then continue to extend Highway E off into a new part of the map. Using the parallel tool, we will create our main lanes and then line everything up for a smooth flow. These connections provide the basic framework, but once again, the smoothness of our curves could be better. I worked on this one ramp the longest, redoing it about 6 or 7 times. Since I was doing this without Anarchy or Move It, I really had to rely on my snapping to get the right curves. And I had to keep a close eye on the height to make sure there was enough clearance. But with enough patience, as well as trial and error, everything eventually lined up. We've completed our last ramp, and we now have what feels like a plausible 5-way star-shaped interchange. Well, almost. As we extend the lanes for Highway B, it becomes clear that we missed an important ramp, going from Highway C to Highway B. This is simple enough to correct. The exit is an easy directional ramp at ground level. No elevation and no flyovers required. We'll just make another tiny tweak to the B lanes. I'm not sure if I will ever be perfectly satisfied. Highway C is going to head off towards the Cape and some fun things I have planned with the Bridges and Ports DLC. Highway E is going towards an entirely new part of the map, part of which is inland and part of which will be a new ocean front. Highway D is going towards the coast. We have new waterfront development to create with entirely new suburbs and low-density communities. But back to C. That will be the most immediate. For that, we will need to figure out how to get through these mountains and out to the Cape and eventually the islands. Of course, the interchange is not finished. We have used so many elevated ramps, but much of this could be built directly on the terrain. In real life, dirt is often brought in to raise the elevation, thereby preventing so many elevated sections. Using our upgrade tool, we will force many of these ramps to be at terrain level, removing the pillars and supports beneath them. We just have to make sure we are selecting the right ones. Once we've done that, we will use our terrain tools. Starting with slope terrain, we will right-click on the high point of a road, then left-click to drag from the low point back to the high point. Next, we will use the Soften Terrain brush to smooth out the edges, making the terrain under the highway blend into the surroundings. With just these few steps, you can see how Highway B looks totally transformed. Things get a little trickier as we move towards the interchange's interior. We must be very careful when selecting which ramps we want to upgrade, so that we do not accidentally change an elevated section to ground level at a place where the ramps cross. We also want to make sure our brush size fits the place we are sloping or leveling. As we get close to multiple pieces of highway, we will want to turn down the brush strength, somewhere around 25 to 30%. This will ensure the terrain changes happen slowly, since there is no undo option. A small brush size with a low brush strength can work perfectly in tight corners. Of course, we might not be able to smooth everything out to our liking, and truthfully, some cliff or dirt sections are okay. I love filling in these loop ramps. It looks completely natural to have them at terrain level rather than elevated, and they will create perfect places for more landscaping. For some of these taller sections, I have mixed feelings about removing the pillars. It would be a lot of dirt to bring in, but maybe we can assume this part of the terrain was a little hilly, and the planners just used the natural elevation. I'm curious what you think. For these Highway E lanes, we will need to be a bit careful, because as they split off in their different directions, they are not at the same elevation. These ramps from E to D and E to C are a bit easier as they have fewer crossovers, and it makes sense that they would be at terrain level. It is the Highway A ramps to E and to B that are so close together and have additional flyovers, making the landscaping a bit difficult. Notice that we've reduced the brush size to only 20, and the brush strength is at 30%. We are doing very fine-grained adjustments here. It appears that we've adjusted most of the ramps that we can, at least the ones that we can do easily. Our 5-way, star-shaped highway interchange is huge, but in my opinion, it is also beautiful. Our landscaping is far from done, so I hope you stay with us. The first step will be to add some grass variation using the Terrain Surfaces pack from Gaga XM. This pack includes a wide range of grasses suitable for unmanicured areas, including some wildflowers. I like to layer them on top of each other to create random patterns, and I end by layering the wildflowers. These loop ramps are the perfect spot for detailing. Let's place some oak trees for a dark green, some linden for a lighter variation, and finally some wildflowers. In the low-lying spots, we'll use Sully's riverbed textures, layering them with the darkest dirt in the middle and spreading outwards towards more and more grass. Around the interchange, this creates the impression of some ditches or other low spots that might fill with water when it rains. Back on the slopes against the ramps, we'll add more grass and more colors from Gaga XM. Sometimes the surfaces don't even need to overlap. The goal is simply to create the impression of different plants, grass, and wild vegetation. By themselves, the harsh lines might seem unnatural, but once we place trees, bushes, and flowers, it all starts to blend together. With each little section we detail, it's helpful to stand back and see how it all looks before we move on. If you've made it this far in the video, it's time to let you in on a little secret. We did not complete one of the ramps. I know it seemed like we were very diligent in connecting each highway to every other highway, but there was one that was going to be quite difficult, and in the end, I decided we didn't need it. Did you happen to notice which one we were missing? Bonus points if you can spot it and leave it in the comments. I know it probably seems strange to release this interchange building video the same week that the Bridges and Ports DLC became available. However, I did it for 3 reasons. First, there was no way for me to get into the DLC and build something in such a short period of time. And since it takes a while for mods to update, I figured it was safe to share a video of something I built before the DLC. Second, I started this entire region over a year ago with the Bridges and Ports DLC in mind. Marathon Cove has beautiful waterways, the peninsula, beaches, a cape, and yes, even islands. The map is perfect for the DLC, and we are going to put it to work. If you are waiting for one of our Parisian-inspired builds, you'll have to wait a little bit longer. The next video will focus on ferries and the islands. In short, I'm releasing this interchange video to give me extra time with the new content. Third, and more practically, everything we have built in Marathon Cove has been focused on one side of the map. To work on our islands and ferries, we need to open up the other side, and this interchange will make that possible. What we've been calling Highway C will actually take us out onto the Cape. It will have to make its way through or around the mountains, something we need to figure out, and then eventually to the very end of the Cape. From there, we will have a decision to make. Do we create a bridge out to the first island? Or do we make it only accessible by ferry? I'd love to get your thoughts as I start to work on it, so please let me know. A bridge could be a fun way to use one of our new drawbridges or lift bridges, so share your thoughts. Either way, the second island is smaller and further out, and that one will be ferry access only. But enough about the future. For now, let's focus on finishing our detailing. I love this overall approach, but of course, right now, the interchange feels very isolated, with nothing else around it. That will definitely change as we develop the downtown, the suburbs, and the coastal area. Some of you who watch strongly dislike large, car-centric developments like this, so I'm already imagining what you will say. But honestly, I'd really like to know what you think. I've had a lot of fun building this. Please consider giving the video a like, and if you haven't subscribed, now is a great time to do so. Also, check out the next video.